Very good. Thank you, Mr. Ramos. Seeing no further questions, thank you to the panel very much for your participation, and we look forward to seeing the next update and greater success with the BREEZE project, because obviously it's consumer protection that we're looking for, and at the end of the day, that's what this will provide. So thank you. And you're going to stay? Okay, very good. Thank you. And now we'll go to the second panel, which would be Consumer Protection Enforcement Initiative. Thank you.
Susan Bonilla has to break at 12 to go to the floor, right. And then you have to break at 2 to go to the floor, but she'll be back, so we're just going to have to keep on moving without any breaks, basically. Yeah. Because we used to have that judiciary meeting at
4.
Yeah, 3:30.
Yes. Yeah, 3:30. Right.
So we're just going to have to try to.
Good morning. It still is morning. If we could introduce ourselves, that would be wonderful. Sir.
Michael Gomez, Deputy Director for the Division of Investigation and Enforcement Programs for the Department of Consumer Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Gomez. You just, go ahead if you'd like to, Director.
Howard Kadani, Director for the Department of Consumer Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Director. You just push that one there. Perfect.
There you go. Kate Keneally. I'm the Chief Assistant Attorney General for the Division of Civil Law with the Attorney General's Office.
Thank you very much.
Good morning. I'm Zachary Morazzini, the Director and Chief Administrative Law Judge of the Office of Administrative Hearings.
Very good. Thank you very much. And I appreciate your being here today for this kind of overview. And Director Kadani, I think you had some opening comments, did you? Very sure. That's wonderful. But, you know, the issue is I've looked through every one of the sunset reviews, and I mean, at the end of the day, each one of them has had kind of metrics looking for performance measurement and standards that have not been achieved. And the hearing process, the discipline, the enforcement, I mean, goes on for years on particular cases. And I find that unacceptable. I think the public would find that unacceptable, and we have to come to some solution to shorten that time frame to get, you know, justice delayed is justice denied. And in this case, I mean, the pressure that puts on those participants, those professionals that have to go through this. So we have to find that solution, and hopefully today we can hone in on what the problem is and try to resolve it in some form. So, Director Kadani, please begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Chair. Before we start to discuss the Consumer Protection Enforcement Initiative, I really want to reiterate my own personal commitment and the commitment of the department to ensure that we have the most efficient disciplinary process possible. As I mentioned earlier, consumer protection is the department's mandate. We cannot go back to the days before CPEI, when an average of 3 years to take disciplinary action was considered good enough. That is wholesale unacceptable to me. We look forward to a continued partnership with this committee and with the rest of the legislature as we continue our efforts. Mr. Gomez here, my Deputy Director for Enforcement, has been working diligently to keep our efforts on the right track. And with that, I would gladly like to turn it over to him.
And thank you for your concern as well. I appreciate it, Director.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Gomez, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Hill and Chairman Bonilla. My name is Michael Gomez. I'm Deputy Director for the Division of Investigation and Enforcement Programs. And to the members of the committees, it's my pleasure to be here this morning, and to distinguished colleagues of the VNP Committee. The Consumer Protection Enforcement Initiative was launched in 2010 as a response to the revelation that many of the healing arts boards were taking an average to take action against the licensee up to 18 months and sometimes even more. The primary focus of CPI was on the following areas: staffing, technology, training, and metrics, also known as performance measures. It was apparent from the beginning that a key component of CPI would be an influx of new staff to assist the boards with their regulatory functions. Of the original 138 positions authorized under CPI, 94 positions are currently authorized. The reduction of those positions was a result of several factors. Some CPI positions were limited term, position cuts were made to achieve salary savings, and there were workforce cap reductions as well. Of the 94 positions, 82 are currently filled. Many of the new staff positions were established to remove the burden of investigations that were referred to the DCA's Division of Investigation without regard to case complexity or case type. The budget change proposal that funded CPI included staff to conduct desk investigations or the more routine complaint types at the board level. The more serious or urgent complaints would be conducted by the Division of Investigations peace officers. A second key component of CPI was improving technology. The department's legacy database systems are antiquated and impede the board's ability to meet their program goals and objectives. As the decades passed, these systems were updated and expanded. However, system design and documentation have deteriorated to such an extent that the systems have been left unstable. The legacy systems have inadequate performance measurement and data quality. It is difficult and sometimes impossible to adapt the legacy systems to changing laws and regulations. The implementation of a replacement system was needed to support enforcement monitoring, automate and streamline processes, as well as integrate information about licensees. This ultimately resulted in the BREEZE system, which will provide the department and its boards and bureaus detailed performance measures, better data quality, advanced configurability, and improved public self-services within a single integrated licensing and enforcement database. The third key component of CPI was the development of training designed specifically for the department's enforcement staff. The department created a 5-day enforcement academy that provides a solid standard baseline of knowledge and practices in all aspects of the enforcement process. It includes instruction in areas such as enforcement interviews, report writing, and subpoena processes, among other things. Instructors come from the department, its boards and bureaus, the Attorney General's office, and the Office of Administrative Hearings. Since it was first offered in April of 2010, approximately 340 individuals have graduated from the academy. Last session, Senate Bill 1243 codified this training. As such, the department is taking this opportunity to revise and expand the training it currently offers. The department is exploring the possibility of eliminating the 5-day model in favor of more frequent offerings for those classes most in demand, such as training on the formal discipline process. Under this new possible format, participants will be able to select the training that is relevant to their job. For example, seasoned field investigators and new complaint intake analysts perform different work and have different learning needs, but currently attend the same academy training. The new format would still include the broad range of enforcement topics as contained in the current academy. Members, the final key component of CPI was metrics, or performance measures. As noted in your background paper, these performance measures were created in 2010. Performance measures are essential for transparency and assist the department in understanding where improvements must be made. The performance measures hold us accountable and help ensure that we are making the most efficient and effective use of our resources. The performance measures used by the department are average time for intake and investigation, average time for formal discipline. The department is currently working with the boards and bureaus in the first 2 releases of BREEZE to use the database to improve the reporting tools used to measure performance. These tools will be available before the end of the fiscal year and will provide much more robust data on the boards and bureaus' caseload and workload. While not every program has met all the performance targets, we believe CPI has had much success. A majority of our boards and bureaus have seen a decrease in enforcement timelines for intake and formal discipline. All programs, not just the Healing Arts boards, are participating in the department's effort to reduce these timelines. In fiscal year 13-14, in regards to the first performance measure, 24 programs met their first performance measure target, and with 25 programs either maintained or decreased their intake cycle time. In regards to the second performance measure, 22 programs met their second performance measure target, and 17 programs either maintained or decreased their intake and investigation cycle time. In regards to the third performance measure, 17 programs either maintained or decreased their formal discipline cycle time. Additionally, regarding the effects that CPI had on the department's Division of Investigation known as DFI, on July 1st, 2010, the first day that CPI went into effect, it took DFI 13.83 months, or 415 days, on average to complete an investigation. On February 28th, 2013, it took an average of 7 months, 210 days, to complete an investigation. As of March 1st of this year, it takes an average of 197 days. The department is also actively working with the Attorney General's Office and the Office of Administrative Hearings to determine what more can be done to help decrease the amount of time it takes to adjudicate cases. Staff from the department's Legal Affairs Division meet on a regular basis with the head of the Licensing Division and the head of the Health Quality Enforcement Section under the Attorney General's Office. The Legal Affairs Division has also been meeting regularly with the Director and the Chief Administrative Law Judge of the Office of Administrative Hearings. In accordance with SB 1243, the Office of Administrative Hearings will begin reporting metrics to the department and to the legislature. These metrics will include the number of cases referred by each constituent entity to the OAH for a hearing, the average number of days from receiving a request to setting a hearing date, the average number of days from setting a hearing to conducting a hearing, and the average number of days after conducting a hearing to transmitting the proposed decision by OAH. The department has had a positive and constructive working relationship with OAH, and the department will be including this topic of reporting metrics in its ongoing discussions with the Office of Administrative Hearings. While the department cannot impose performance measures on the Attorney General's Office, the department and the AG's office have worked successfully together and maintained an open dialogue over the past few years in identifying areas of improvement. The committees have also asked the department to address the case acceptance guidelines developed by the Division of Investigation. These guidelines are in line with the original CPI budget change proposal that established the positions for purpose of triaging and prioritizing cases to ensure that most serious cases are addressed first. The cases are categorized as either urgent, high, or routine, and your committee background paper displays that on page 19. Urgent cases deal with serious crimes, including repeated overprescribing, sexual misconduct, or multiple complaints of substantial fraud. The division is working with the Board of Registered Nursing and the Board of Vocational Nursing and Psychiatric Technicians right now to implement the guidelines, and we are hopeful that this will have an impact on reducing enforcement timelines, ensuring that the most serious cases are dealt with immediately and by the appropriate staff. Members, thank you for your time and patience, and I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Of course, Chair Bonilla.
Just a few questions that came up. One is, if I'm recalling, I think last week we heard a lot from our investigators about the prohibition on travel to trainings when you were talking about the trainings, and maybe there is no connection, but are they able to come and travel for the training you're referring to?
Chairman Bonilla, yes, if it's relevant and specific to their job versus a conference where there is probably more of an information sharing. But if it's a course, an actual course for investigative skills or investigative knowledge, it's allowable and they can afford it.
Okay, I think that's something we should just look into, because I think we heard it from several different boards in our hearing last week that there was an issue around travel. And I'm sure we were trying to save money, which is a good thing, but we also want to make sure everyone has adequate training. Are you doing the training online, or is it in person, or is it both?
It's both.
Okay. The second question, I noticed when you were going through the performance measures, on the third performance measure, everything showed improvement. Mm-hmm. You got to the third one, which was only a maintenance, it sounded like. What was that third performance measure?
That third performance measure is the total time for adjudication. That's not the intake or the intake and investigation time cycle. That is the adjudication, the formal discipline.
And then you mentioned the fact that the Attorney General's office has, you don't have the ability to speed up their process?
No.
Does that figure into that third performance measure?
Yes,
Not
that-
showing an increase
Yes,
or improvement, I guess?
or the maintenance of.
Okay, all right. Great.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Gomez, a couple of the issues that certainly related to delays in the time frame is, do you feel that the reason for case delays is a staffing problem, or do you think it's more of a systemic problem?
I think it's a little bit of both. What we see in state service is that individuals will promote or transfer to other departments, and what that causes is a vacancy line, and then you have to train the people up. The second issue is that we'll talk about systemic is that more and more with the healing arts boards, it is much more difficult now to gain access, even if the patient was to give us a release, to gain access to patient records. And in many cases, the institutions or the custodian of that record, even though we serve a subpoena, will force us to go to the Attorney General's office for subpoena enforcement, and then that has to go to the Superior Court. So you can see if when we go down that due process line, that can expand the delay 60 to 90 days, at least. And we've had instances where we've actually gone to Superior Court, we've lost the enforcement, and we've had to resubmit, if you will, our ability to do that. Now, the other option would be, Mr. Chairman and Madam Chair, is that in some of these cases, the systemic issue that I brought to your attention last year was that even though we're going for the administrative process of the suspension, revocation, or the discipline of a license, in some of these cases, you're going to have criminal charges as well. And in those cases, if we're talking over prescribing, we're talking involuntary manslaughter, or cases where those are tried up in the criminal with the district attorney's office, that criminal case is going to proceed first because the evidence contained therein is not ready yet to be shared with the administrative process until that district attorney releases that evidence. And that is not unusual, members.
Could you tell us, you mentioned Breeze a little bit. Have there been some difficulties getting information out of Breeze that have affected your investigations at all?
Not for the Division of Investigation. We have not had issues with access. The only issue we've had is to train people, making sure that as we get, for instance, we had a lot of retirements on December 31st. The peace officers at 3% of 50 seem to all retire at that same period. And, a lot of my command staff, a lot of the supervisors, we had to gear them up and get them ready. And so, we didn't have access issues. We just had to make sure that they were coding, closed cases, reassigned cases, so to make sure that the data was accurate and standard.
I do want to underscore what Mr. Gomez said. The reports issue that I previously spoke of gave Mr. Gomez a opportunity to create some standardization across a lot of the boards, in that in order for the metrics to really mean something, we have to understand, we need to make sure we're counting an orange and orange and apple and apple. So to Mr. Gomez's credit, he and the user groups were heavily engaged in developing what those standards are and what they count for. That way, as we measure ourselves, we understand what the metrics mean, and we could then hold ourselves accountable.
And members, to clarify what Director Gadani was mentioning, is that we have in Chairman Bonilla, you mentioned the issue of culture. We have practices that we assumed were one way, but the assumption was wrong, because when you look at how some boards were closing cases, they would close cases when someone went on vacation, and then they would reopen them when they came back from a person who came back from vacation. So there were these kind of rules or practices that maybe we needed to standardize and make sure that the data integrity was not only point on, but to make sure that it was transparent, that we all knew what the standardization of that entry was or is.
Ms. Baker?
Thank you. Mr. Gomez, can you say a little bit more about the implementation of the prioritization guidelines with respect to the Board of Nursing and the Board of Vocational Nursing and Psychiatric Technicians? You said you're working with them on that. Can you elaborate on how that's going?
Yes. Just a refresher, the CPI did envision, and its intent was to utilize all the resources, if you will, of the positions that were coming to the department, the division's peace officers and the non-sworn investigators at the board level. So there was a matrix, I think, in your background package that showed that. However, those standards or those metrics were not mandated by law. They weren't mandated that the boards follow that, and there's nothing in law right now that says they have to do it. So what I've been trying to do is reminding them of the intent of CPI, looking at the matrix, the desk investigations and the certain high cases that really belong at the board level should remain at the board level and deal with those, whether it's 801 cases, which are settlement cases, or they're document cases, but the more higher priority cases, the urgent cases, be referred to the division's peace officers.
Okay, you're referring to, so you say high priority, not the category high, because that's the middle level category.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Are you getting cooperation?
The RN board has been working with us pretty well. We're having to revisit actually the methodology of which those cases are referred to us, because there's a little bit of I think of a training issue or a referral issue of what should come to the division versus what should stay. With LVN board, I'm assuming that you're looking at the statistics. We were not receiving cases from LVN board for at least a couple of years until recently, when we started working with the board, the governing body of the LVN board, to determine that policy direction needed to shift.